So, Sai, I've seen these cool gun morphing videos. I want in. You want in? Yeah, I want in. I'm an artist. This seems like the hot new media design tool. I want in. So you want to learn how to maintain a machine learning computer, yeah? No. I just want a fancy program that makes art for me. I'm afraid there's a bit more to it than that. Can't I just like rent some cloud service that does like everything for me? Well, I guess you could do that, and in the beginning it would probably even save you some time. Perfect! But you will have to learn that system then, and you will be limited to what they allow you to do. I don't mind that much. Plus, running a cloud GPU is actually pretty expensive, and you have a perfectly fine GPU in your computer just here that you could use basically for free. Okay, you got a point there. So what do I have to do? I'm glad you asked. This is the ultimate STYLEGAN2 Docker setup guide for artists. You done? So hey, I hope I could convince you now to install STYLEGAN2 on your own computer and give this whole AI art scene a try. I've personally been in this world for quite a while now. But before we go into Storytime, let's first just put an overview of this entire tutorial on screen somewhere here. So these are the relevant steps that we're going to talk about with the timestamp, so you can navigate this tutorial somewhat more easily. I'm also going to put a write-up of this entire tutorial into the description to make this as accessible as I can. So, some remarks. If you already are familiar with how to set up Linux and maybe have your favorite distribution already, I would recommend you to skip to the step install Docker. And if you don't really want to set up a machine learning computer right now, I would recommend you to like this video and bookmark it maybe, so you can find it more easily when you actually need it. Because we all know, eventually you will come back and join us in the AI scene. So yeah, maybe like this video, subscribe, so you can find this easier when you actually have to. And then just go to the outro, see if any of my future planned videos are more relevant to your situation right now. And stick around, we're gonna have some fun. So, where was I? Ah yes, Storytime. When I started with this whole AI art scene, I think DC GAN, so deep convolutional GAN, was the hot new thing, and I think progressive GAN was just around the corner. And now we made it all the way to STYLEGAN2, which certainly quite a step forward. I've been in many cool projects along the way, and I've set up dozens of different computers, always reinstalling from scratch, installing Ubuntu, installing nvidia drivers. I tried native Python, Conda, Docker, basically virtualenv, basically everything. And I had to do this process over and over because it's kind of brittle and always something broke, and I digress. But the point is, there was a lot of trouble getting the right versions for everything to work. And I feel that now we finally reached a point where this is not as much trouble anymore. In fact, all this trouble of installing the right drivers and the right libraries and all the right versions is kind of a thing of the past in my experience. I have a really favorite setup now, which is basically the Dockerized or containerized machine learning computer. That is what I'm talking about in this tutorial, and it has become so significantly more easy to do this whole machine learning thing now that we have Docker and nvidia, proper nvidia support in Docker. That was actually the point why I got motivated to share this tutorial and start this channel in the first place. Because I've got a really nice setup and a really good system now that actually fits into a half-hour setup tutorial. And I think setting up this thing is so straightforward that basically anyone can do it with like maybe an hour and a half of time. So, without further ado, let's take this USB stick here and prepare a Ubuntu installation with this stick and go through this whole process. Enjoy!
So as a first step, we're going to set up a dual boot between Windows and Ubuntu. In my case, I have the luxury of having an extra SSD where I can put the Ubuntu installation. It is, however, also possible to repartition a single hard drive to carry both a Windows and an Ubuntu installation. This is slightly more complicated, and if you want me to cover that in the future, please leave a comment below. So we also have this USB stick here, which we're going to turn into the installation medium. So we first go to the Ubuntu website. I recorded this video while 19.10 was still the most recent version. Everything I'm going to show you works from 18.04 LTS onward. But now that 20.04 has just been released, I strongly recommend you to use that instead. But anyway, now we're going to download the Ubuntu image, whichever version you have chosen in the future. And then we're gonna save the file to download. And then we're going to download the Rufus tool to turn the USB stick that we have into an actual installation medium that carries the Ubuntu image. So we go to this page rufus.ie and we're going to download this tool here and also save it to downloads for now. And then while the image is still downloading, we can already have a look at the Rufus tool. So here it allows us to pick a device, which is gonna be the installation stick. So in our case, it's the USB stick that we want to put Ubuntu on. And then it also allows us to pick an image to put onto the installation medium. So once the Ubuntu image has finished downloading, we can load it into Rufus by clicking select here and selecting the image. And now we have the USB stick selected, we have the image selected. We're going to leave all other options on default and click start. And now Rufus informs us that we need some extra data that it can download off the web. We're just gonna accept that and click yes. And here we just pick the default, the ISO mode. And now it warns us that all data on the USB stick will be erased. We're okay with that. So now we're going to fast forward through the copy process. It took me about 4 or 5 minutes. And once it's done, we can go to the Explorer to double check everything. So our USB stick was now renamed to Ubuntu 18.0. And if we refresh, you can also see that some of the space is now occupied by the installation files, which you can see here. And that's pretty much it for the preparation of the installation stick. We are now going to reboot and actually load into the Ubuntu installation menu. So I have just rebooted my PC. Since I can't record this part in software, I changed to recording the screen itself with my phone camera. So we should see the motherboard post screen any moment now. There it is, and for me it tells me which button to press to run boot menu, which is F11 here. So I go into this menu and then select the USB stick, which is the SanDisk Cruiser Blade. And now we are booting into the Ubuntu menu. I've sped this part up a bit. And here we are in the installation menu. If you make it this far, all is good. However, I have also encountered a problem sometimes that I just boot into Ubuntu and then stare at the bionic beaver without the actual menu coming up. I was able to fix this problem by setting the nomodeset option. So you reboot until you see this screen, and then you can press any button to go into this menu.
you select your language. And here you then press F6 and set the nomodeset option. And then we just double check again and we select install Ubuntu in the main menu. Here I'm just gonna fast forward through the boot process for a bit. We see this Ubuntu 18.04 loading. And then finally it should bring up this menu. And there we are. At this point you can just proceed with the installation as usual. So now that we have made it into the installation menu one way or another, we are ready to fully install Ubuntu properly. So we just select the language and the keyboard layout. I choose English for both. Then we can connect to a network either by LAN or by Wi-Fi. So I connect to my Wi-Fi here. And then here in the screen we select the normal installation and we download updates while installing Ubuntu. And we also install the third-party drivers, which hopefully will install the NVIDIA drivers for you. For me, it unfortunately didn't work that easily. I had to manually install them later on. Now on this screen, it asks us how to put Ubuntu on the actual hard drive. We're gonna choose something else. And then it loads our hard drive structure. So in this drop down here, we can see all our hard drives with labels, which is quite helpful. For this demo, I'm going to install to the Samsung SSD 860, which is my secondary SSD. There would be the dev SDA. We're going to remember that because this is important down the road when we partition the hard drive. So we select that for the bootloader installation. And then we go up here and look for the dev SDA. We can see there's free space of 1 megabyte and then there's an NTFS formatted partition, which is coming from our Windows. We're going to remove that with a minus button and then we're going to repartition the space. So apologies that this is a bit hard to read, but first I'm going to put a reserved BIOS boot area of 1 megabyte at the beginning of the space as the first partition, and I press OK. And after this is applied, I go down and put in the remaining free space. Here I'm gonna put a swap area, which is a place to put data that doesn't fit into RAM anymore. The rule of thumb for the size of the swap area is about double the size of your RAM. So I'm gonna choose 64,000 megabyte and confirm that. And then with the rest of the space, we're gonna create an ext4 journaling file system and select the mount point root as indicated by the slash. And that is where the actual operating system is gonna live. And all your files and all your data. Now there is also a philosophy to separate the actual root operating folder with your home folder in different partition. I'm not a big fan of that, and I think for a simple installation it's easier to just have one root. So we're gonna choose this. And as we click install, there is the warning that the drive will be repartitioned and we lose all the data that might be on there. That's okay, and we're gonna continue. And now the installation is running, and meanwhile we can set some information. So our time zone, which is Berlin for me. Then we can create our login, so Cyremore, and I call the computer Cyrix, and then I enter a password. With the radio button below, you can optionally select to just boot into your account without entering your password on boot. I do not recommend that. And then we fast forward through the actual installation process where Ubuntu copies all the files onto our drive. And at this point, all we have to do is restart once again. And we mash F11, and in the boot menu, we select the SSD onto which we just installed Ubuntu.
And then we get into a login screen. And here I zoom in so my camera focuses. So this is the login screen. So there's another problem that can occur here, which is that you enter your password, you confirm, you see a black screen, and then you're back at the login screen. In my experience, this is also a nomodeset problem. So we're gonna press Ctrl-Alt-F3. And now we're in terminal mode and can log in with our username and password. And then we execute sudo nano @default grub and enter our password. And then we have a text editor, and in the line where it says group command line Linux default quiet splash, we enter space nomodeset. And then we leave nano and save by pressing Ctrl-X and enter. And after this, all we have to do is execute sudo update grub. And this will update our boot options to now boot with nomodeset. And if we reboot once again and go through the boot menu and boot into Ubuntu, we now load into a login screen with 640 by 480 resolution. But it actually boots into Ubuntu now. And here we can switch back into software recording. And in order to fix the resolution, we can try to go into display. But in my case, there wasn't even an option to set the resolution. So what we do instead is we're going to bring up a terminal with Ctrl-Alt-T. And we're gonna execute sudo ubuntu-drivers install, enter our password, and fast forward through the installation process. And this should install any missing NVIDIA drivers. And then we can just reboot one more time. And after all this troubleshooting, we now have a fresh new Ubuntu installation. So we click through the What's New screen. Here I will skip the live patch and then disable the telemetry, but that's up to you, I guess. And finally, we are presented with a selection of suggested software. We are going to ignore that for now and instead bring up a terminal with Ctrl-Alt-T. And then we go through the process of updating all the software. So we first say sudo apt update and enter our password. That is going to fetch all the available software from the Ubuntu repositories. And then we say sudo apt upgrade to install those updates. And now we have an updated system. And we can start with installing the software that we actually need for STYLEGAN. So first is docker.io. So we sudo apt install docker.io. And then we try out if our Docker works by typing sudo docker run hello-world. And this will then download the hello world image from the Docker repositories and print this nice hello world message from Docker. So you might have just noticed that we execute the docker hello world container in sudo. If we try to run it just like this, docker run hello world, we get permission denied. We do not like this that much. We actually want to execute Docker without going through sudo environments. So we look up the Docker post installation. And the first entry on Google is this nice page with a couple helpful commands that we are just gonna copy paste into our terminal. And that will enable us to run the Docker just with our user account without going through sudo every time. So we copy all the commands. And these commands create a group with permissions to run Docker and add your user account to that. So now we can try docker run hello world again. And we get the message without having to use sudo. And now we have a proper Docker installation and can use containers. However, we can still not use the NVIDIA graphics card from within the container. In order to enable that, we will have to install an add-on called NVIDIA Container Toolkit. So we are gonna search for that. And that brings us to this GitHub page here. And now we scroll down a little bit. And here we find the installation guidelines for Ubuntu, which is just the script here. In order to execute the script, however, we need curl, which is a command line program to query web requests, which does not come pre-installed. So we're gonna sudo apt install curl and confirm this. We don't need to enter the password because we already confirmed sudo earlier in this terminal. Then we clear for clarity, I guess, and just copy paste this here. And this will install all the necessary NVIDIA Container Toolkit drivers. Okay, so in my case, the last command, which is sudo systemctl restart docker, actually wasn't copied properly. So we're gonna copy paste that manually again. This restarts Docker with the new NVIDIA options. And now we should be able to actually use our NVIDIA graphics card from within a Docker container. So we scroll down and there's a test command here. So docker run ---gpus all. ---gpus all gives you access to all GPUs. And the NVIDIA CUDA 10.0 base is the container with the NVIDIA environment properly set up. So we're gonna clear the terminal and then say docker run ---gpus all to give access to our GPUs. NVIDIA CUDA, we omit the 10.0 base to just download the most recent one. And then we say NVIDIA SMI. So this will set up the NVIDIA environment and then execute NVIDIA SMI to show us the status of our 2080 Ti, as you can see from the 11 GB of VRAM. So now we're finished with Docker and we can actually look at STYLEGAN2 now. So we open the GitHub page. And here we look at the example images and the abstract for a moment. This is what we want to generate later on. So now we download a local copy of the code by saying git clone and giving the URL to the GitHub repository. And this now downloads STYLEGAN2 into our home directory. So we cd into there. And now if we scroll up to the file list here, we can see that there's a Docker file in the repository. And we can use that to build a Docker container by saying docker build dot for current path -t STYLEGAN2 for local name STYLEGAN2. And then when we look into the files that we just downloaded, and here we can look into the Docker file, which has the instructions for building the Docker container. And it uses the TensorFlow 115 base container and installs SciPy requests and Pillow as pip requirements. So that's all it really does, and that enables it to run the STYLEGAN2 within the container. So currently it's downloading the TensorFlow 115 base container. So let's fast forward through that. And then it installs the pip requirements. And here we are. We now have a working STYLEGAN2 container. So we can now check our container images by typing docker images. And there is our new STYLEGAN2 container that we just created. And then we can go into that container by executing docker run ---gpus all to give access to all GPUs, -v ~:home to give access to our home directory into the container, which you usually don't have, -u $id -u $id -g. This tells Docker that we are the operating user and gives us ownership of all files that are created. And then we say -it STYLEGAN2 bash. -it is needed for interactive mode. STYLEGAN2 is the container that we want to use, and bash is the program that we want to run now. So now we're in a new terminal that runs in the container. Let's have a look around. And if we execute NVIDIA SMI, we can see that our graphics card is accessible and correctly detected. So now we navigate to the STYLEGAN2 folder, which we can access because we linked the home directory into the container. And now to demonstrate that everything is running as it should, we are going to render some images from a pre-trained network that was provided by NVIDIA. So on the GitHub page, we're going to scroll down here and then we see this command here. This command will automatically download the checkpoint for the Flickr Faces high definition model if it isn't available locally yet.
as you can see in the terminal. And then it will use that downloaded model to render some test images. So the download is complete. Then we are setting up TensorFlow plugins, which are code by NVIDIA written to enable faster STYLEGAN performance. And then if we go to the STYLEGAN2 results folder, we can already see there's a subfolder generate images with a log.txt, which just has the terminal output and some submit configs. And then we start generating the images, and you can see them popping up on the right side. And now Ubuntu starts loading the thumbnails, and we are happy because we just managed to set up STYLEGAN2 from complete scratch with Ubuntu installation and everything, and now actually downloaded the software and render the test images. And that's all there is to it. So now we can look at the images we just rendered and the terminal which just processed the STYLEGAN2. And then we can also look back at the command that we just used. Docker run gpus all vhome blah blah blah. Kind of cumbersome and hard to remember. So we can now set up a custom function that executes this but is a bit easier to type. For that we cd back into our home and then edit our bash rc config. So we copy this string here. And then we use nano on the file .bashrc to open up a text editor with a config. And then we scroll all the way to the bottom. And here we will define our custom function that executes this whole Docker command, but is easy to type. So I define a function. I will just call it ndocker, but you can choose whatever you like. And then we paste the command that we use to open up the Docker container. And since we might want to use different containers later on, for example, to try out some upscaling models, we replace the container name, which is STYLEGAN2 in this command, with an argument. So we delete STYLEGAN2 and put $1 instead. This will allow us to say ndocker something, and whatever container name we put after ndocker will then be opened up and we can operate in that. So we save this. And now we exit and open up a new terminal. For some reason, there was a double exit. I'm not quite sure what this means, but this might be related to the issue that I experience now when I get permissions denied. So this is me debugging the error, and within the next 2 minutes or so, I try out to define a different function and I try to debug what might have gone wrong with the permissions here. I reopen the terminal, the CS works, the other command, which is pretty handy. It just combines cd and ls. And then finally I find out that the permissions for using Docker have been reset for some reason. So I run through the post installation again, and then everything works as expected. So I can now call ndocker STYLEGAN2 and open up a bash in the STYLEGAN2 container. So I decided to leave in that little bug hunt, if you will, just to show that even with a script, stuff might just go wrong. But it's usually not much of an issue, and if you just stay calm and eliminate the possibilities, you can usually fix it within a couple minutes. So now we're back in the STYLEGAN2 container. I already cd'd into the repository, and here we have another command for using a pre-trained network to render some test images. So we go back to the result folder, and the network is loaded. The plugins are pre-compiled for executing STYLEGAN2. And here we have 4 more beautiful images, which, if we take a closer look, feel somewhat familiar. And as we scroll back up at the GitHub page, we can indeed see that it's the exact 4 images that are given as example results above the abstract. So we managed to perfectly replicate the results of the STYLEGAN2 paper. So I hope you've been able to install STYLEGAN2 for your own now and replicate the results that we just saw in the video. If this has at all been helpful to you, please leave a like for the YouTube algorithm and subscribe to the channel. I have some really cool ideas for future videos. First of all, I'm obviously going to talk about how to train STYLEGAN2 on your own dataset so that you can generate more imagery than just the faces that it comes pre-built with. Then I'm also going to talk some more in detail about dataset preparation, how to guarantee all your images have like the right size, the right encoding, how to clean up your dataset, maybe even talk about crawling websites for data. Let's see. Then I'm also going to dedicate another video to actually rendering videos, because we don't always just want to see like single images of faces. We want some cool morphing videos. Then another possible idea, if there's enough interest, is how to install this whole thing, not with Docker, which has been my favorite, but in Anaconda. Anaconda has the advantage that it works on Windows, where the Docker NVIDIA support is not yet implemented. And in fact, it's actually what I use on this computer at the moment, because there's too many programs like Premiere that I still need to use under Windows, and I don't want to switch around all the time. So there's some advantages to still use Anaconda and maybe a Windows instead of the Ubuntu Docker. But if at all possible, Ubuntu is my #1 choice. Then another really interesting video is also going to be the Peter Bayless community fork of NVIDIA STYLEGAN2. So they took the whole code repository and branched it and implemented some nice to have functions and some new functionality that you don't get out of the box. And finally, I really want to go back to the good old times of deep convolution again and talk about that a little bit. So that will be probably the next video ideas. Please leave a comment and tell me what you are most interested in. And then, if this has not been enough to help you get through the trouble of setting it up, I'm also open for consulting calls. I've done this before, and I'm sure something can be arranged. And you can also order some commissions from me if you have like some cool artwork in mind, but don't want to go through the work of developing it for yourself. And then, if you want to see more of my art, you can also follow me on Instagram. And as I put a teaser for this video up on Facebook, someone actually asked me if there's going to be a Patreon, so yes. If you want to support me with this channel and help me buy better cameras and equipment in general, you can support me over there. And I also thought about, well, I got a lot of behind the scenes material for this like huge video that I've put up as a first project now. So I'm thinking about putting that into the Patreon area, because I don't feel like the behind the scenes really goes well on the main AI art and tutorial channel. So if you're interested in that, please also leave a comment and write me a message or whatever you prefer. And lastly, thanks for watching.